Christian Price, I'm the mayor of the city of Maricopa. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to thank Vice Mayor Nancy Smith, as well as Councilmember Rich Fidiello, also President of the Maricopa Consolidated Water District, which is Chris Giles, and also the board secretary, who's Lucia Rodriguez. And both of the council and the board had decided that this would be an appropriate task force committee where we could kind of talk and resolve some of the things and differences that we have. And this was a great step towards communication. I was just telling Chris, somewhat jokingly, but in a lot of truth, that I was spending some time this weekend and even today going back and reviewing the video from the Board of Supervisors meeting and how enjoyable that was for all of us. But it was really interesting to hear some points and counterpoints and have some time in between it and really just kind of say, at the end of the day here, there is a goal, and what kept being reiterated was that, we need to have better communication, we need to have better abilities to try and solve these issues and these problems, and I think that's really what we're after here. And so, we left the agenda very broad-based, and that was done on purpose. My goal today is to try and, rehash everything or go through everything over again. Clearly, council members, might have some questions or points. Certainly, Lucia and Chris, if you have questions of us, we certainly want to open it up to you. Any answers we don't have, we'll certainly ask staff. We're going to ask the staff to, kind of come, except for Billy, you already have a microphone right there, but any staff that's called upon, please just come up to the podium, speak into the microphone, because we have people that have joined us via, the conference call. And then at the same time, we are videotaping this because we think it's important that, it's transparent and public, right? So that it's on our YouTube channel, and anybody that wants to watch it can watch it. So just like I went back and watched the Board of Supervisors meeting, it's the same principle. So, I don't think that we'll resolve everything by any means, but, this is the first of if we need more meetings, we can have them. If we can reach some resolutions and start there, I think that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, the goal is to certainly open a dialogue between us, and anything we do decide here today is not a final decision. Clearly, we're not a majority of council, you're not a majority of your board. It's just an understanding between the entities that says, hey, let's go back and basically tell the rest of our council and our board what we're trying to accomplish and how we think we can best go forward and do it. So, and then bring back our suggestions, and hopefully they'll see what we've accomplished. They'll be able to watch the video if they so choose, and then they can kind of hear the discussion, and hopefully that'll help them make a decision on what we're recommending to them. So that's certainly and ultimately the goal. Again, I'll turn it over to Chris if you have any opening comments or statements, and like I said, we'll just kind of go through a few questions and just keep it loose. So anything you want to say, go for it.
We as the board are looking forward to working with the city council and members of the city to get this resolved and get it going. No.
There we go. Okay, so first and foremost, like I just said, Bill was kind enough to give us all an updated version of things that we'd seen since the last Board of Supervisors meeting. So there's some updates in there. Obviously, we all just got it, so I'll take a chance to review it after this meeting. And really kind of, I think that the biggest issues that we have is, and Chris and I were actually just talking about it. We're just talking about, kind of the things that Global does in the way of fire hydrants and other things. And so we'll kind of circle back to that in just a minute. We were talking about, their system and how that reports to the fire department and to the city and those types of things. And clearly they're different between what Global has and what the water district has. And that's fine. What we need to find is a way in which we communicate that better between each other so that we ultimately have the same information and we're working off the same platform. And so, I don't want to hash anything that's necessarily, I don't know how I would call it. I mean, I think we have to approach some of these things, but, one of the things I think that I wanted to somewhat establish was, I think that there was this was a big point when I was listening back to the Board of Supervisors meeting. And so I think this is where I wanted to kind of start. And that was, the agreement that we had, the IGA. And there seems to be some faults on both sides here of what transpired, how it transpired, and what took place. And so I just wanted to have legal kind of touch on some of, how we viewed the agreement, how it worked, how it didn't work. Clearly understand that the board has kind of canceled it based on the 15-day requirement, those types of things, and that's all fine. But I think that from our standpoint, where we can do a better job of making sure you guys get the information you need. At the same time, I think it's important that you understand how we operate so that we don't have those confusions in the future, right? If we do come down to another IGA, and certainly if we are able to move forward today with some resolutions, I think that we also have IGAs, because we'll want to know between the two entities the details that we work out on what needs to be accomplished in order to make sure that we, are able to do those next things that we all agree on. And again, if we agree as electeds and our boards and our councils respectively agree, then our staff will follow that through, because that's what they do, and they do a great job of it. So we just wanted to start there, and I just wanted to turn some time over to our legal just to kind of explain where the differences that we saw in the contract that was originally from the IGA, and just say this is, I guess, why we didn't understand that basic principle. So we'll start there.
And I think members of council, members of the board, I'm Dennis Fitzgibbons, I'm the city attorney. I think the main thrust of what I just want to present, and I'll be quick, and I apologize, I have another meeting, so I will leave, and I have another attorney here, Nick Cook, who will sit in for me. But looking at your December 28th letter, I know it was I think the second paragraph talked about how the IGA was approved and whether the city actually approved it. And I think there was some confusion because you didn't see it come onto a board agenda and didn't see it in the board minutes. And so I think there was some confusion on whether or not the city ever approved it. And I just wanted to let you know that the city originally, when we first incorporated, all contracts and things like that did go to the council for the most part. But in 2010, the city council authorized our city manager to sign specific contracts under a section in our city code. He has the authority to contract. And so with regards to IGAs, depending on what they require, is there money involved? Is there not money involved? Is it simply services? There's a whole analysis that goes into it. All of them are actually reviewed by the city attorney because that's required in the IGA statute. But with regards to this contract, and I think those that have been around for a while will realize, I think the contract, after you guys approved it, came to the city. Our city manager at the time was Gregory Rose in November, and we have documentation on November 22nd of 2017. He approved it in our computer system in Legistar, so that means it's going around for city attorney to approve it. I think city clerk looks at it. But Gregory was leaving as city manager, and the interim city manager, Tricia Sorensen, then signed it and approved it in December 2017. Now, once she was appointed interim city manager, she had all the authority of our city manager. And so this contract specifically never went to council. So you would never have seen it on a council agenda. You wouldn't have seen it in the minutes. But it was approved and signed by Tricia Sorensen. She had the authority to enter into the contract. And so I just wanted to make sure, because that seemed to be one of the first things that I think caused some confusion. But once Tricia Sorensen was appointed interim city manager by the city council, she has all the authority under our city code and under our section 3-24, she had the authority to contract. And so she did. It was approved, originally approved by Gregory, but signed by Tricia Sorensen. So it was a valid IGA. And so I just wanted to clear that part of it up, Mr. Mayor. I think that's what you asked me to do.
Dennis, what is our typical process after something like that is signed? I mean, one of the things that the district has said to us is that we did not get them a signed copy. And, clearly I can understand that they would want to have a signed copy, just like we would want to have a signed copy. So, I know that oftentimes when I sign certain contracts, it's done in duplicate or triplicate. That may or may not have happened in this case. Can we kind of look at or even pseudo-identify, maybe where we fell short, one of the things we could have done better, did it get lost in the system, who typically does that? I mean, I think we kind of need to give them some understanding of what we usually do, and maybe, we can look at that area and make sure we do a better job in the future, but simultaneously explain that still was a binding contract based on how things transpire.
Right, and Mr. Mayor, yes, I'm not sure. I think it's a very, very fair question. I'm not sure exactly. Typically, the city manager would give it back to potentially whichever department the contract came from, or to the city clerk's office, and then the city clerk would make sure that the signed contract was provided to whoever the other contracting party was. In this case, I don't know if it was just because of the timing on it. It just happened in the beginning when Tricia took over as interim city manager. I'm not sure. I haven't gone back and searched all her emails or where it went, but I'm not sure we can find a cover letter sending it to you. But I mean, it could have gotten misplaced at that time in the process, potentially.
So I guess the follow-up question would be is that, I think that's something on both our sides that we can certainly do a better job of. I mean, it's our responsibility to send it to you. At least I think it is. I mean, that's why if it was the other way around and we had sent you one and we would want it too, but I think that, both sides can do a better job of arguing and saying, hey, I didn't get it, raise your hand and now that we have contacts, here at this level, I think it's certainly something that we can both do a better job in the future of saying, hey, I didn't get it. Can you get that to me? You've got the city clerk, we've got Sarah, you and I, Chris, certainly our legal counsels, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, that's something that we can change or fix in the future moving forward. I know we all sail through perfect storms sometimes and things get lost or misplaced, and we certainly apologize for that. But is there any questions that you have of us or city attorney on how that works? So we just want to make sure that that's clear and understandable, that that's the way it works here.
I'm sorry. We're good. We're good. Yeah, no questions on this side.
So did the district receive a copy, whether it was signed or unsigned?
Councilmember Vitiello, I'm not sure we can say that. I think they've always maintained they haven't. I don't think we haven't found a transmittal letter from Tricia to the district, but I think they've always maintained they never got a copy of it. So.
Wasn't during the supervisors meeting that they had stated, I'm not sure who it was, stated that they never signed it, which means,
no,
did they see it?
That wasn't said in the supervisors meeting. I don't know if that came up early on sometime, but they clearly signed it because we have a signed copy by both parties, and they've clearly terminated it because they gave us a notice of intent to terminate.
Okay, so who signed it on their side?
Bill, would you push the little button?
I think you're right. It was Hoover.
Yeah, that was the chairman at the time, Joe Hoover, and attested to, I believe, by, who was the secretary treasurer at the time? Probably Steve, yeah. But yeah, so we had transmitted to the city a signed, executed copy of that agreement.
And Steve had signed it?
Steve, who was the treasurer at the time.
Okay, so where is there the disconnect that no one received one from everybody, but now everybody knows that Steve signed it?
Standard policy or procedure that we've experienced in the past has been that when we send an IGA with a city or to any other entity, that entity then makes a point of sending back the fully executed document, which didn't happen in this case.
But didn't Steve sign it?
No. Steve was our treasurer, secretary treasurer. Mm-hmm. We then sent that executed, on our side, executed copy document to your people and never received anything executed back from the city.
But somebody did see it from your side.
Well, yes.
So,
no dispute about that. But, like I said, in the past, one public entity usually has always taken the effort to return that executed after they were done with it. That didn't happen in this case. I mean, we do other IGAs with other districts, with the county. We always get a document back that's been executed by that party. It's just standard procedure.
So, Councilmember, I don't think the question is I mean, this was originally the question. The original question was it a valid contract? And that's what was brought up originally. And I think that the argument would be is that, with a signed contract from them and from us, it's a valid contract.
Right.
And whether they thought that it wasn't valid or not is really a kind of a moot point to some extent, because in the end, they still followed the contract in terminating it. That's what legal counsel was just saying, is that they followed the 15 days and went forward and terminated it based on the possibility that it was even enforced. So, I think we'd all agree that if it went before a judge, the judge is going to look at that and say, well, the fact that you guys didn't get one doesn't make it any less legal, because it's clearly signed by both parties. But the challenge is on their side, they just didn't know if it was, and the way that they went about looking for it was to go back through the meeting minutes and to look on the meeting minutes and to see that it wasn't there. So I think that was the whole point of my, trying to just establish the fact that according to the city code, the powers that, because as we grow as a city, what you find is it's harder and harder for the city council to validate every single contract that ever comes through. Otherwise, our agendas would be, 15 hours long, right? And then there's just not enough time for that. And so what you do is you start to delegate those things in certain facets here. And so that's certainly what the city councils, even all the way back to 2010, had done. And they said, hey, based on these parameters, any city manager the council grants authority to be called city manager has these rights and powers imbued upon them. So, again, I think that's what the establishment of the misperception here was, that, the way they looked for it was probably not the best way to look for it. The best way would have been to pick up the phone and give us a call and say, hey, we didn't get one. But whether they did or not, and who they spoke with, I think that's what we're trying to say, is now we have those connections, right? We have this face-to-face, we're on text message, we can certainly know how to get in touch with each other, and so we'll solve that problem moving forward. But clearly, again, we can always do a better job of transmitting that. Certainly we fell short on that if they didn't get a copy, or, it transmitted and it wasn't received, or whatever the case might be. But, simultaneously they can do a better job of picking up the phone and calling us if they haven't received something. And the same would be true for us. If they had signed it second, we would be wanting the same thing. Legal would be saying, hey, I need a copy of this contract. That's always what happens, right? So anyways, any other questions, any other thoughts, concerns, issues there? Cool. Okay. Anything else, Councilmember, Vice Mayor?
I have something. Regardless of who screwed up on what side of the contract, it was still a clause in there saying we can cancel it at any time. You guys can cancel it any time. It was canceled. Now, let's get back to going what we're supposed to be doing here today and working on a resolution to get another one going.
And I think that is exactly the point of and I think that's for us to decide, do we want to establish an IGA? And if so, how? Because some of the disputes have been, based on being a fire district or not being a fire district, and those types of things. And, I don't personally want to go over that today. Again, it's up to you guys, whatever you guys ultimately want to do. What I would like to see, and this is going back to the Board of Supervisors, I wrote down some of their comments. They said, this is a communication issue. There are solutions that can be, explored here. I would go back. This is from Supervisor Miller and from Rios, even from Goodman, saying that we really need to do all in our power to resolve the perception that there is not enough water to serve the community in the appropriate fashion, and that's what they said. And so I agree with that. I think that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And Bill, you said it from the dais there. You said, hey, I would be amenable, or you would, speaking for the district, generally speaking, and of course they have to say as much, but I think that you said as well that, that you would be amenable to saying, let's find a way to do this with a third-party test and those types of things. And so, I think that's something that I would like to kind of hash out there, throw on the table, get your thoughts on, kind of move stuff around here, because ultimately that's going to lead to another IGA, because again, you're not going to do something that we're traipsing around on your property, with your lines and your stuff without an IGA, right? And we're not going to do the same, because neither of us want that liability. But at the same time, I think that the issue here is the transparency that we're all after, right? It's what we're trying to find out is that, you have nothing to hide, we have nothing to hide. Our constituents certainly want to know it, but we do have different perceptions of what's transpiring. And so I think that, what I'd like to find a way to do is to say, how do we go and first and foremost, test all the fire hydrants, right? Just the whole thing across the system, put it on record, once and for all. That way you've got the same information I've got, and I've got the same information you've got, and now we just know, right? And I know things change, but at least at a point in time, we're all on the same page. And that takes us to a point of being able to discuss the next issues, right? I mean, I think we can systematically kind of tick all the boxes and hash everything out as we all are operating off of the same page. And that's the thing I think we have just been lacking in is, it's not saying you're right or wrong. It's not saying we're right or wrong. We just have different perceptions. And so if we can all get on the same page as to establishing those perceptions, we got no place else to go but up from there, is my opinion, because at least we're all on the same page and we're all going forward. So I just want to put that out there. What are your thoughts on it? Again, open it up to council members and you guys, please share your thoughts, and let's start, kind of massaging this, because ultimately, what we decide to take back and sell our boards and councils on is then what we're going to direct our staff to do, which is ultimately moving forward with another IGA that establishes that particular issue. And it may not be a long-term issue that we're establishing an IGA on right now. Maybe the IGA is just simply an agreement or a contractual binding, and I also want to put out there that the city will pay for this. I mean, we feel so strongly about it that we'll pay for it, okay? And again, we can come to terms on who the third party is. We certainly want to make sure that all representatives are there, so that everything is kosher and above board. But again, I certainly just wanted to convey that we want to remove impediments to finding these solutions if possible. And so we certainly want to put that out there as well as far as paying for it. So I'll be quiet now and you guys can talk.
The one comment I would make is I believe that there is an IGA back out on the floor that was sent from the district to the city for the fire flow things that sent back in November, that has not received a response yet.
Dennis or Fire, or do you want to talk to that or address that? If you didn't hear the question, I think the city manager is going to come up here and say something to us.
I'll invite Chief Leffler up if information is correct, but it's my understanding we did respond to it in saying that there were virtually no changes. We sent our draft and you basically changed 2 words, and there was nothing really to discuss. However, that particular agreement did not discuss a citywide or a district-wide examination of the hydrants all at one time and to get all of those tested. Is that correct, Chief? And you're welcome to come up if you have something else to offer. Either one of you.
Just a little history on this thing. When we met, I thought it was a good meeting, and we talked about things. The process that we were looking for wasn't, even in the old IGA, was not very robust at all. It was very much just a shell IGA. When we got the one from you, we made our edits on it, and we sent it back to you, and then the one that came back to us was virtually identical to the first one with a few word changes, changing it from a fire hydrant, which was what we called it, to a flushing hydrant, but it was very similar, if not almost identical to the first one. Now, we still have the one that we did, but the response from you didn't address any of those items.
So one in November.
The one we got changed a few words, but that was really the only meat to the IGA.
We can certainly resend the one from November, because it doesn't sound like you received the one that we sent in November.
Yeah, come on.
There's one in September, I think, that was just minor edits. There was a subsequent one, I believe, that addressed.
To my knowledge, we've only received the one, correct?
Hey, Bill, can you talk into the microphone so that your attorney and everyone in the audience can hear?
Sorry. You want me to repeat myself? I was just basically that I think there was a subsequent edit that was sent out in November that discussed in greater detail some of our issues versus just some minor edits like you may have gotten in September.
It was in Mr. Mayor, council, members of the board. My name is Brad Tassi. I'm Assistant Fire Chief working with those IGA drafts. So just to kind of give a little timeline on that, we received the cancellation of the original IGA and then your first version of it. We met, we retorted, we developed a much more thorough IGA, sent that version back. What I received back was in essence your original IGA. And in fact, when I called out NFPA compliance, your version back, the only addition other than some name changes was that you would not be held liable for the NFPA compliance. So at that point, it was so far separate between the two drafts that it kind of died on the vine per se, and then subsequently we're at the Board of Supervisors. We just need to come back to the table to get a little bit closer to how polar opposite those two IGAs were.
I think actually we have received everything that you've sent us. I just think they're so far apart that we need to maybe get back together again and go over in detail the differences between the two.
Okay.
When can we get that started? When can we get that started?
Great question.
Just, oh, sorry, just one other point too. These original IGAs that we were working on addressed maintenance programs, not system-wide, not this one-time system-wide 30-party test. This is more of a long-term maintenance program side of it. So that's just the other comparison to what we're talking about today versus those two other.
So, sorry, and I didn't mean to cut Councilmember Vitiello off, but to President Giles' question, I mean, is this something that, based on obviously the discussion here that we have two parties that were very far apart from one piece of the IJ kind of holding up the whole thing, is it better maybe to separate these out right now and talk about, just a system-wide, I'm going to call it an audit if that's okay, right? I don't know if that's a bad word or not, but the system-wide audit of all these hydrants, right? And then come back and talk about the subsequent, negotiations to an IGA that then bring the parties back closer together. Because remember I was talking earlier about how you kind of establish the floor and then you build upon it and you build the next part. And so I'm just curious if you think that maybe we should separate those out, or if we should just continue to work on, our staff getting together to keep negotiating closer, or whether we should be kind of telling them what closer is. So I'll put it back out there for you.
Go over to the thing up there.
Gilbert, just tell everybody who you are.
Yep. Name's Gilbert Sanchez, Field Operations Manager, Maricopa, Seedwood. Since the Board of Supervisors meeting, we got to work. We do our annual maintenance on all the hydrants. I gave Eddie updated map of all the hydrants. We went to every single hydrant -3 because the Pinal County is finishing up. But every hydrant is functional. We flushed every hydrant. Every arm came off per the fire chief's recommendation. We oiled every single hydrant, greased where needed. So every hydrant is ready for your inspection. We just need to get an IGA going so we can move forward. So, but we are waiting on one hydrant, the end of McDavid, next to the recycle center, and that'll be here March 11th. So we'll get that installed. But we are trying to work with you, but we do this annually. So we took it a step further, and with the recommendations of the fire chief. So thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Yes, did you have something, Councilor Video?
Yeah. Brad or Chief Leffler, when you said that we were so far apart, could you reiterate what you said about what the portion that was so far apart, so for us layman people, we understand what that meant?
Basically, I think this is in two separate areas. Our initial approach to the IGA was for the maintenance of the process. We were looking for a holistic approach to making sure that the system was viable, that we understood the system, and that we had a communication going. Eddie does have things from you. Correct.
Yeah, Gilbert, would you come up and speak in this microphone?
Yeah.
Pull your chair up, Gilbert. Pull your chair up.
Those flow tests there are from a third party, and that goes from all corners, different sides of our system, so that it shows our different flows throughout the system. So I had that done, plus we went to every hydrant flushed and maintenance to every hydrant. So I understand you want to get a third party to, that's a whole different issue, but go ahead.
Well, I guess our concern was that, one, we wanted flow testing as an initial base, so we knew that everything worked. But in addition to that, we want to flow personally, if we could,
Yeah,
each
absolutely.
hydrant. But that is according to the IGA and talking with you guys, that we were to have somebody present with us, and there was a topic in the IGA saying that if there was any damage to the hydrant that was either there before or after we did it, that we would be liable for that. Is that correct? And so we were basically looking to finalize that in our IGA. And we just never got there.
Okay, my question from earlier still hasn't been answered, is when can we get started on this maintenance issue?
We're ready now. We're ready.
Yeah, we are too.
Okay, so let's have a question by Vice Mayor and then keep going.
So I'm not interested in starting on the maintenance IGA until we do the testing of all hydrants study first. Is that the appropriate direction to take?
Vice Mayor, I think at this point, the board, if I'm correct, wants to take baby steps. The first thing that was out there was the maintenance agreement. We want to start with a maintenance agreement, and we can build from there until we build the trust between the two parties. Right now, I think there's an absence of trust on both sides that needs to be resolved. I think we can work on that by working with the fire department once again, like we started to, a year and a half ago, a year ago. So yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I think that's the intent of the board, is that we start with maintenance and we'll work from there and build it up.
And Chief Leffler, how do you think the order should be? Because it doesn't make sense to me to go on with maintenance until you know that all hydrants are working properly, and then come up with the IGA maintenance agreement.
For us, I would rather see the complete system, the viability of the complete system, so that we don't damage something in the event that it's not a viable system, and then we work on the maintenance agreement post a complete overview of the system. That would be my preference.
I think trust comes from knowing that all of the hydrants are properly working and that we have an understanding of that process and the information that comes from that type of a study.
Well, actually, you're quite correct. That's what the maintenance agreement would do. It would verify that all those hydrants are working. That's what maintenance agreements are. You go out there and you verify that everything's been greased, everything is flowing, everything has a operational characteristics, that there isn't damage around the fire hydrant. That's all part of a maintenance agreement.
So to the point and to Chris's question, if the flow test by the third party is in the maintenance agreement, then we're solving the question and answering the question.
I could accept that if that's the case.
And putting that in there.
Right.
And we're good to go, right? I mean, to some extent, right? There's still details to be worked out here, but I think that's what we're saying the same thing. I think it's just kind of coming back around to it. So, Fire Chief, are you hearing that same thing? I mean, if we're talking about the flow tests in with the hydrants and of all the hydrants in the system with the maintenance agreement, is that satisfactory?
It is. It seems a little backwards to me in that when we do a maintenance or a hydrant maintenance, we don't do a flow test at that time. We don't have the process to do that. If we were assured that the entire system had been flow tested and then we do the maintenance, that would be complete the loop, if you will.
That makes sense to me, but if it was all included in the same IGA that we're going to do an all hydrant test and flow test prior to the maintenance continuing on, or at the same time the maintenance is continuing, is that acceptable, or do you see it as two separate things?
it would be acceptable as long as we're assured that the system is complete and pressure tested. We would go through and do our hydrant testing one by one, and hydrant maintenance basically is a better word. So I don't know if it's semantics or not, but basically, if we're assured that the system can tolerate being flowed, and we can flow enough water, that was one of the other things that we talked about, flow enough water to clean the system, we would be totally satisfied.
We just flowed the whole system. Our staff went to every hydrant, flowed the system. We greased every hydrant. Every arm on the hydrant has been taken off. Took off every nut on top on the cloud version. We did complete maintenance on every hydrant. They're all functional. You're not going to be flushing anything out of the lines. It's going to be maybe a little rust,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get a lot of debris or anything. It's ready to go. So.
And while we appreciate that, that's an annual process.
And to flow test every one, I talked with the third party. I wanted him to flow test all of them. He said it was a waste of money. That's why he wanted to. I gave him a picture of our district area, and he said 4 would be enough. And that's the 4 flow tests that you have there.
And
Well,
I guess what concerns me about that is the issue that we had with 2 hydrants in the same area with vastly different flow rates.
yeah, and I'd like to move along away from that because I think we've all established that that was the result of the bridge construction, that the contractor who was doing the work in the area had disrupted or turned off those hydrants as part of his work. So I think this keeps coming up. It's kind of repetitive, but I think we've already answered what the issue was there. And since then, I don't think anyone can identify a hydrant that has that issue within our district.
Mayor and board, I'm fine laying that issue aside, but you brought up the issue of developing trust. So trust includes us being on site, jointly picking the third party and testing all the hydrants, not 4. It's not a cost or a waste of money if the city's willing to spend it, and it's not your expense. So I think it is critical that we be able to do that. The real issue at hand is NFPA compliance or not. We've been told through the draft agreement they put forward that they're okay with NFPA compliance if we fund any differences. That needs to be explored, but before we can explore that difference, we have to understand what is and what isn't in compliance. Therefore, that's why we feel it's necessary to have a system-wide testing of all hydrants at one time with agreed-upon third party, with their staff present and our staff present, that we pay the bill so we can see what the conditions are. Maintenance itself will be contingent upon the findings. You can't pre-draft a maintenance agreement without having those findings, in my opinion, and I think staff agrees with that. So I think part of the difficulty is NFPA compliance, and at the end of the day, we'll have a debate whether they do it or don't do it, and we do it or don't do it, but we have to understand where we're at before we can even have that conversation.
So you said you tested 4. How many total hydrants are there?
63, I think.
63.
Flushing those.
So you have 63, I heard? Is that correct?
Yep, 63.
So you
correct.
tested 4. We don't know how the other, how they're going to do. And what is the difference if we're willing to foot the bill to test the whole system with a third party before we make a maintenance agreement? Because if there's issues with the other hydrants, why do I want to foot a bill that you just said everything was perfectly fine because you tested 4? I personally would never make an agreement like that. I'm not going to pay for the whole system to be checked and then I find out 20 more are damaged or something's wrong with them, and you want me to agree to pay for the fixes.
No,
Does
and I
that
don't-
sound liable to you?
You're the ones that want to pay for it.
No, I'm willing to pay for it, but I'm not going to make a maintenance agreement, okay? If I come into your home as a plumber I'm not going to write up a maintenance agreement until I find out from you what is broken in your house. That's how I write up a maintenance agreement, because if everything's busted, why would I tell you, yes, I'll take care of it before I know what's wrong with it?
But there's nothing busted.
Yeah,
But you're asking me for trust, and I'm willing to pay for the trust.
And I'm willing to, let's get an IGA going, and let's go hydrant to hydrant. Let's do it.
And that's what we're willing to do, but obviously, like the chief said, I'm not going to put a maintenance program together until I know what's wrong with it. That's all I want to put it out there. That's
Well,
it.
why don't your people go with our people and turn every one of them on one at a time and then figure it out? Instead of bickering back and forth and saying who's going to do what.
Well, so I think going back to what we just talked about here, I think timing is the semantics issue that we're trying to work through this. So, Gilbert says that the system has just been annually flowed, and I have no reason to disbelieve or disprove that. I have nothing to that. So, the fire chief just said that again, I know full well that this is not going to take place without some sort of an IGA, right? Without some sort of an agreement or compact, we can call it whatever we want, but that says we're going to go and do this. So yeah, we know the city will pay for it. That's done, check. We know that the audit's going to take place, done, check. Okay. We know that all parties are going to be involved, check. We know that there's going to be a third party doing the issue, check. We know that the water is going to be metered, check. We know we're going to do all of them, check. Okay, so that's all established. So if in the IGA, can we leave it somewhat open-ended, to your point, and to what you just asked, and to what we don't know what we don't know as an agreement as a whole. So can we then say, let's move forward with the IGA that says we're going to move forward with the flow tests and this third party and all these other things, and that once that's complete, we will come back in good faith and then therefore establish the maintenance agreement between the two parties to then therefore move forward with that, right? Because we'll at least now be working off the same numbers. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Somewhat. My thing is, why can't we have your people work with our people and go around and turn them all on, one at a time or two at a time, whatever it takes, see that nothing's broken. Now, there's the issue that's been cleared up. And now we'll move on from there. Would that be something you guys are willing to do?
City manager, can you address a little bit of that and talk about?
Well, I think that's exactly what we're talking about with a few caveats. That your people and our people do go out and test everyone and flow them, but we have a third party who actually tests the static pressure and the flow and capacity and all those. I think that's exactly what we're asking, to be able to do that as the premise for then the maintenance agreement.
Let's get it done then.
Okay. So my next question is to the board. Again, you got to go back to your board, right? You have to get approval from them to move forward with this. But typically, and maybe we can identify some places that we have done well or not done so well together here. Typically, who from your staff typically does those agreements or those negotiations? I know it goes through multiple people. Clearly, it's going to go through our fire department, our legal department, our city manager is going to look at it. There's lots of people that I assume Bill looks at it, and I assume Sarah looks at it, and I assume Gilbert looks at it, and your legal department looks at it. I mean, are we missing anybody here? Who are the points of contact that need to make sure so that this can happen?
That's pretty much all of it. Steve Cooper will be our attorney that would be addressing it. Steve Cooper will be our attorney that's addressing it.
Okay. Mr. Cooper will be the attorney that'll deal with it ultimately. Yeah. Okay. City manager?
Council and board, with your permission, we'll do the initial draft and then circulate that to Mr. Cooper from our attorneys, and then they can work out the initial legalese, and then we can bullet down through the different staff sections for updates, and we'll move that along quickly.
I think that'd be great.
Thank you.
Is there again, I think we're trying to establish the basics here. I don't think there's too many things that are or could go awry, but this is the legal world, so anything can go awry, right? So is there anyone that we want to, if point of discussion or point of conflict arises, how do we want to deal with that? I mean, clearly we trust our staff to try and work it out, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So how are we going to take that conflict and then resolve it further amongst us so that we can get it done?
I would be a person of contact you guys could get hold of if you need to.
just contact me then, and okay, we'll go from there. So that way I can take it back to my city manager and ultimately to my legal.
Yep.
We can have that discussion, we can be on the phone.
Yep.
And then you can take it right back to your board. Got it. Just wanted to get that out there so we're all on the same page.
I'll get it to Bill if
Yep.
if it's something that pertains to him or
Absolutely.
whatever.
Okay, good. All right, we're getting there. Excellent. Thank you very much for your willingness. Appreciate it. I think that leads in again to to kind of it's that inspection of the system, right? That's that holistic viewpoint of what this looks like so that we can then establish a maintenance agreement, because that's the goal here, right? I think if we're all on the same page with the maintenance agreement, then things will work much better moving forward. And I think we've all agreed that it's worked well in the past. We fell apart somewhere in the middle here, right, in the last few years, and now we're trying to fix it. So that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. What else? Anything else at this time? I've talked a lot. You turn it over to you guys. You have questions or things you'd like to ask us or things that we can address. I know there's a lot more out there, and we certainly can review it. We'll stay as long as you want, but I think this is a really good first step, and I certainly am not opposed to coming back and doing this as many times as we all deem feasible so that we can get this stuff done. So.
I agree. I would just like to know what's involved in the maintenance. We've been talking about the maintenance schedule, the maintenance this, maintenance this. We're not a fire district. We're a water district, water improvement district. I don't know anything about fire hydrants. Right.
Basically, what we will do with your cooperation is we will flow every hydrant. We will flush it until clear. We will make sure that all the stem works, that the caps come off, that the caps go back on. We'll re-grease the caps. We will do that once a year. And it's not more involved than that. And we will protect the people's landscaping around there. We have ways to do that, to keep it off their rocks and things like that. The one thing I want to make clear, though, is that we flow it until it is clear. And sometimes that's a little difficult for some people to understand. And if you do that once a year, there still may be a little bit of sediment, but not a tremendous amount. But that's essentially it.
Go ahead.
I have a question. We did buy the food grade grease for the hydrants, so we'll provide the grease for the hydrants. Got to be food grade since we're.
That'd be fantastic.
Yep. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Great cooperation.
Who's responsible for sanitizing the inside of the thing when you're done?
We don't.
It's just the water is sanitized?
It's just coming out. Yeah, we're chlorinated.
Okay. That's what I had a question.
City manager?
I just wanted to add, as part of the maintenance agreement, that still means setting up scheduling with the district as to when they will be done, so you have the opportunity to have people on site. Most of the impacted areas, city right-of-ways, so a lot of the landscaping, curb and gutter, if there are, those are city right-of-ways, but as was said, we will protect public property against any flows with regard to that. But I just wanted to add, part of the maintenance agreement has to include the scheduling and communication.
Chief Leffler, can you describe just for Chris, and you'd explained it to me once and to the city council, but I'm not sure if they knew about it. And can you talk about the importance of the flow and why we do this and why it's so critical, just generally speaking, because you were just talking about the maintenance of it. Why do we do this maintenance? And we all know we don't want anything to break, but how does that impact fire service on a random or even day-to-day basis?
Well, essentially, the hydrant is the lifeblood if we have a fire. We have 500 gallons on our trucks, and essentially, if it's a known rescue or something like that, we make a fast attack with tank water while somebody's hooking to the hydrant. If that hydrant fails, we've got a big problem. We've got people in there, if they've run out of water. It's happened to me. It's happened to several of our firefighters in the past, not necessarily with yours, but in certain circumstances, because anything can fail at any given time. So it is the critical component of a firefight or a rescue at that point. If I could go back 1 second about the maintenance agreement too, in addition to, servicing the hydrant, we will need to know the layout, which I believe we have in your book out there, and we will have that uploaded so that we can track that on our computers. The other component to the maintenance agreement is that either from us or from you, if there's a known issue with the hydrant, that we have a quick turnaround and that is identified either by us or by you, if you guys find it before we do, that it's communicated to us immediately so that we don't, and it's tagged so that we don't try to use that hydrant in the event of a fire. And that there is a timely response to the repair of that hydrant. I mean, the typical stuff that you would do for your customers anyway, but from our perspective, as a firefight, it's that much more important.
What is considered timely? A month?
And we can lay all that out in the IGA.
All right.
It's taken 3 months to get a hydrant, with COVID, everything, it's taken about 3 months to get the type of hydrant that, any hydrant in our system that needs to be replaced, taken about 3 or 4 months to get. So we've,
There's a supply chain.
Yeah, but.
Right, and that just makes the communication all the more important. So if it's going to be down for an extended period of time,
Yeah.
and we know about it.
But I let Eddie know if we got a hydrant down, and I do put a out of service ring on them if it's out of service, so.
And we can outline that, and you guys can review it in the IGA and make whatever.
And I think that's real important, especially because, again, everybody wants to see things fixed as quickly as possible, but I fully understand, the supply chain economics of how things right now just don't move real fast. But from a reliance standpoint, it really doesn't matter if it's out a year or 10 years, right? If the fire department knows that it's in its computer, that when they arrive on scene, that hydrant isn't working, then they're already going to be planning the length of hose that they need to attach to the next one. That's the next nearest one, so they can get it there. So clearly, we'd love to see them all operational as quickly as possible, but that's not the issue. The issue is let's make sure that we are completely communicating that information ASAP. And then when they come back in order, because that goes into our computer system so that there's no reliance or there is reliance on where each of those locations are. So I think that's that communication that we're talking about again as well.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council and the board, I just want to talk a little bit more about that Esri mapping system. So it's going to be proprietary just to us, right? So we'll have a login and password. You'll only be able to see your district. We'll be able to see the district. If there's a hydrant that's out of service for one reason or another, our crews will be able to take a picture of it. They'll note what the issue is. You'll see it in real time. We're going to have green hydrants are good, yellow are more of the concerns, and a red is out of hydrant. You can be sitting anywhere with an internet connection at home with the log in and have a good snapshot of a hydrant number 2022, look at the picture, see the notes, and then see what the duration is. It also timestamp that, so we can go back to say, hey, it's been a few weeks, let's just double check, oh, it's a COVID issue and the steamer caps are on back order. That's good. We understand some of the supply chain issues, especially nowadays. It's just that open line of communication and having a visual map for us to see really helps that. And again, we're going to absorb the cost of that as well. So,
Mr. Mayor, I would also make a comment or a point that all of our maps are on your GIS. We actually forwarded that to them back in January, I believe. So you have all those maps that are in the book are on your GIS system.
Perfect, thank you. And Brad, just to point, on the Esri system, as you were talking about being able to see that, is that something that obviously the staff or the board of the district will be able to log in and access as well? So they'll see it in real time, just like you all would?
Absolutely. They're going to see the same product, the same end product that we will. So it's, again, helps in that communication when we're seeing it both in real time, and you'll be able to actually track the crews going out there as they're making those adjustments.
So how does that work? I mean, if Gilbert's on scene and he says, hey, this hydrant's not working, he was the one who discovered it, he found it, and he takes the picture and he puts the out of service ring on it, and he puts does he upload that, or does it go to someone in our locality and then we're responsible for, how does that work, just so that we're kind of all under the understanding of how this takes place?
So we can work that out with whatever will work best. We can provide a license that you would take the Esri Workforce app and put it on a device, a Google or Android device, and you could have the same exact access that we do on our end to make those adjustments in real time. It could be whatever's beneficial when we talk about the nuts and bolts of the implementation of this system, but we're very comfortable. It's your infrastructure. It's very comfortable. If you find it, simple enough to use and beneficial, that you can do it as well. That way, When you fix that hydrant and you put it back in service, we know that second that that's red to green. Or if it's, red to yellow, it's awaiting a part or whatever it could be. So yes, we can work on that.
Well, and that seems real practical. Again, I don't want to add anything to your workload, Gilbert, but it seems real practical than having to come home or come back and send an email to somebody and it getting lost in the system on our side or your side and not knowing if it ever gets data entered or not. So again, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I would think that real-time information is generally more helpful than relaying messages.
So our hydrant's gonna be on an app, and I can update the app, and that's how you will be notified for future, is that what you're saying?
That would be one way. We'll make it redundant because it should be followed up with an email and we'll set up a group.
Okay.
It won't just go to Eddie, it'll go to a group so that any one of us can get that. And we can track it via email as well. The technology can fail, so
Yeah.
the good old email, and or even a phone call,
Right.
will be a redundant system, so we'll back it up.
So when do we want to get this started?
Thank you, Mayor. These details will be ironed out as a part of the maintenance agreement when we get to that, as far as protocols and procedures that all parties can agree to. I wanted to maybe raise a topic that, Bill, I think I just heard you say your GIS files are given to us in hard copy or electronically? As PDFs?
They were sent to you as PDFs to your IT person.
Thank
He
you.
said that's fine.
I know there's been a question about Homeland Security and those type of things. We are Homeland Security as a city. We are part and parcel to that. The right-of-ways are ours. We have electric, gas, global water and sewer, and every other utility in town. So we don't need to know those things that are not in our right-of-ways, like your wells or other things. But those things within our right-of-ways we need to be aware of because we do have our own CAD system and GIS, and we want to download all those together to help anyone. And frankly, if you have a project and you need to know what else is in the right-of-ways, we're happy to share that information with you too. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that this is information that is proprietary and that we are part and parcel to Homeland Security, and we are exempt from those rules because we're the first call for Homeland Security.
Okay,
Right,
so,
your GIS person assured me that it would be restricted access so that we wouldn't have to worry about, an outside entity accessing our data, knowing where, our facilities are and doing damage to them. So
Right.
as long as I had that assurance, I was fine with giving the GIS files.
perfect. City Manager, President Giles had asked, when can we get started on this? And so I want to make sure we answer that question.
I told the chief to tell legal, but since I'm up here, I'll tell Nick, I want the draft by the close of business, which is Thursday for us, so we can get it to you and get started.
Do you have my contact information as well?
Well, we're going to start going attorney to attorney, and after they get happy, then we'll feed it down to you to get to your staff and to the mayor to get to the other
Perfect.
staff. So
And that way it
I don't
also
think
go along
that
with
part will
conflict
happen by
resolution.
Thursday,
Right.
but let's get the attorneys, they do their things, and then we'll get it down to our levels.
Get them happy first.
Right. Does that work?
Whipping right along here. So at the moment, I'm really thinking we're hitting a stride here. I think we should run with it. But certainly want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable where we're at. Vice Mayor, Councilman Vidiello, Chris?
Yep.
Lucia? Okay. Anything else I certainly want to be respectful of your time. I know you guys are busy. I know someone hasn't slept very much, so he needs to go and go to bed. But you guys are very busy individuals. So certainly want to be respectful of that. And like I said, there's lots of stuff that we can come back and continue to talk about. And I want to make sure that all that is on the table. Anytime you have questions or concerns, please raise it with me or any of us or anytime. But certainly I think that if we can have an agreement that we can move forward on in this first step, first phase, this will give us something to play off of, something to build a foundation on, and then take it to the next step. So, once that all that information is in, we can have it evaluated, we can come back and we can lay it out here and say, okay, this is what we see, this is what you see, and let's start talking about our differences again, and let's figure out a way to find that middle ground on what we see as differences and hash out the next steps. And if everything is golden and good, well, then we've moved beyond the problems, and that's perfect. That was the whole point in the first place.
Right.
Piece of cake, right?
Get it done.
All right. Well, with that, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for being present. Thank you for all your input. Thank you for the dialogue. That's what it's all about, and the communication. And certainly we have an order by which we can continue to communicate. We'll have something on our desk by this Thursday, onto your attorney by the end of this week, and then you guys can deal with it and then we'll follow up with you and find out where you're at with your stuff. And if there's problems, we'll talk.
Yep.
And go from there.
Feel
Okay?
free to get a hold of us if you need us.
Perfect. All right.
Alrighty.
Well, we're adjourned then. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for all your time.